Welcome to a special bonus episode of Cinemaholics. Why are we doing a bonus? Well, there's a lot of stuff coming out this weekend. We're going to be talking about Evil Dead Rise, I assume, this coming weekend for the show. So we thought we'd do a bonus because, as it happens every once in a while, Will Ashton, say hello, Will.
Hello.
You're supposed to say hello, Will. And then I'm supposed to be like, oh, dang it. That's not what I meant.
Oh, no, the worst case scenario is happening.
But normally, Will and I, we watch movies at totally different times. In this case, we both watched Beau is Afraid at the IMAX event.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were able to see it and all that good stuff. And we were able to see, Nicole Kidman, salute the troops into the theater. All that.
First
all
time.
That.
I actually saw people clapping for the Nicole Kidman thing. I've heard all about this, but
yeah,
very
same
rarely.
here.
Yeah,
this was only like the second or third time I'd ever seen it, and outside of like the internet. And there were people reciting. One person got up and put their hand over their heart. I mean, this was an Ari Aster film, so of course, the most annoying people in the world showed up at the. We're starting off a little fresh.
Yeah.
Let's begin our conversation about Beau is Afraid with the director.
First, I'm getting already kind of nervous, so let me take my pills.
How many pills do you need? Are those tranquilizers?
And these are real pills, by the way. All right.
I was not sure actually. Are you just trying to get into the spirit things?
Gotta get my water. As for people who've seen the movie, will know why.
Very important.
All right, now I'm finally ready to deal with John's malarkey.
So Ari Aster has made, this is his third film, and I think we were both big fans of his last movie, Midsommar. I think that's fair to say, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know we had a lovely conversation about that film with Julia Tatey, if I'm not mistaken, back in 2019. Yeah, it was one of my favorite movies of 2019, and likewise, Hereditary was one of my favorite films of, I believe that was 2018?
2018, yeah.
Yeah.
Or was it 2018 or 2017? I think it's 2018.
2018.
But
yeah.
I got to tell you, I really liked Midsommar a lot. It's my favorite of Ari Aster's movies by a pretty clean, mile, for sure. Hereditary, I like Hereditary. I don't have big issues with it. I didn't like it nearly as much. I forget exactly like what it was about that movie that I felt like was missing for me necessarily.
You often hark on films for, being horror movies about grief. And I know that movie is like one of the like quintessential, this is about grief horror movies of the current era. So I can see why. That wasn't the
only thing, though. I mean, that was back like so many years. I felt like it was before that was really starting to get on my nerves.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it just didn't come together for me as much as I would have liked. I think the reason I like Midsommar is because I think the last third of that movie is like airtight, and I think he really nailed it. Whereas I think with Hereditary, it just where it totally went, I just found myself kind of being like, that's it.
I mean,
a little bit.
I will say that Midsommar is probably the only one of his films with a maybe conventionally appealing ending, which is maybe a stretch to say. But like, I get that people don't love the ending of Hereditary, and I'm sure a lot of people have thought to say about the ending of Beau is Afraid.
It's not that I dislike the way it ends thematically. I think the way it like wraps up makes sense, and the story of it and the message behind it, like I think come together fine. I think it's more of like, people are like, Hereditary, that movie made me want to throw up, and I'm like, did it? Like it, I felt like the final few set pieces, I think it peaks with the side of the road scene, and after that I was just I wasn't on the edge of my seat. I wasn't feeling tense. That's more what I'm talking about.
Agree. That I watch a lot of horror movies, as you know, and I'm sure listeners know, and I feel like Hereditary is one of the few horror movies of the recent era I've seen that genuinely got me scared.
Wow. Maybe it's just something broken inside me. Who knows?
Maybe. I mean, broken inside. Yeah.
Beau is Afraid. This is a very, very different film from those first two. I'll start with something nice. It's very different structurally.
Yeah, sure.
It's way more surreal. I mean, Hereditary and Midsommar are more like they're more grounded in like a plot and a screenplay that it looks like somebody actually wrote, not just sort of jotted down after a fever dream. You know what? I'll start with something negative. I just want to ask directors everywhere something real quick.
Start.
to do me a little favor. I'm not asking for much. Can you please stop writing whatever this you call a screenplay is after having a sweaty dream because you ate too much before you went to bed last night and you thinking that's a movie? Because it's not translating. Like, maybe it's translating for some people. I don't know what's going on there. But the entire time I'm watching this movie, I'm like, look, if you want me to be inside of your head, just don't charge me. In this case, like, I'm the one who should be getting paid. That's all.
I don't know. I mean, I was poking your leg earlier in the sense that, like, yeah, obviously structurally, even somewhat tonally, this is a departure for Ari Aster. But I mean, I think it's undeniably his work.
Of course. Like, yeah. Definitely, I'm not saying it's like completely different. Like, oh, it's like somebody else made it.
Right. I mean, this is absolutely his blank check project. Probably the first and maybe only A24 blank check. Where
it's the biggest budget of an A24 film yet, $35 million. And
I thought it was
they're not making that back.
I thought it was higher.
Some have reported it higher, but the 35 is the official. I think the highest I've seen is around 50. But
I heard 60.
I wouldn't be too surprised considering like what went on in this film, but let's just, call a spade a spade. A24 is eating that. There's no way this movie is making I'll be shocked if it makes like $10 million.
I think they've been sitting on this one for, I think, a year now. It's been like in the can for a little bit, and they're like, well, I don't know how we can really release this, but they decided to kind of make this their everything everywhere all at once, I guess, kind of by default. Like, they're giving it the same rollout, the same treatment as that movie got this time last year. And I certainly don't think it's going to be that film for audiences. I think it's certainly going to be a little bit more limited as far as its appeal. But I do think it is very delightful that a movie like this got a IMAX release.
Maybe in a sort of like puckish Midsummer Night's Dream kind of way. No pun there intended. Now, we should also mention too, since we were talking about the development, this is based on a short film that Ari Aster did in 2011, which is called Beau. Mm-hmm. And apparently there's like a whole sequence of this movie that is really where this like kind of started. And I think the original draft of the script like leaked a long time ago, like a decade ago or something like that.
Yeah.
And Aster's called this a nightmare comedy, a Jewish Lord of the Rings. There's all kinds of funny stuff you can say about this movie, I guess. But for me, it kind of reminds me of like so the listeners might know, like I write books.
Okay.
And the stuff I wrote 10 years ago, like the stuff I did, like it would be like me trying to take something I did and wasn't good at and try to like turn it into a movie or try to turn it, like release it without really like doing the work for it is my impression. And I'm getting the sense that you're going to disagree, but it's just like your first work can be so shoddy. And so that's the only explanation I can have, because I'm confounded, Will. I'll set this movie up, but I think this is one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
Wow.
At least in the last few years. And I've seen that people like apparently love this movie and are getting really mad. Some people are getting really mad. Some people are just being like, I love it, whatever. Other people are like, you suck. You don't understand anything. Quit your job. And I'm like, sure, I feel like I should. After watching this movie, I want to. Okay, so what is this movie about? And then, of course, I want to hear your thoughts on it, Will, because I need to know. I can't wait to find out. This stars Joaquin Phoenix as Beau Wasserman, who kind of lives in like a surrealist version of our world. It's the present day, but everything's completely heightened. He lives in like a version of what might be Los Angeles that is just absolutely, it's like cartoonish in terms of how dangerous it is. Like, the first part of this movie I was not loving, but I was kind of interested and like intrigued by it because it seemed like it was trying to say something interesting about homelessness and the people who, how people react to crime like on the streets. And I was like, man, this is everything people say about New York and San Francisco, the movie. Sorry, I should say this is the thing that like conservatives say about New York and San Francisco, the movie, where it's like, oh, it's like a hellscape. You can't walk anywhere. They're burning down the city. And I'm just like, in this movie, that's actually kind of accurate. But the basic plot is that Beau is an extremely anxious guy. He's the son of a famous and wealthy businesswoman named Mona, who's played by Patti LuPone. And he spends the majority of the movie trying to get back home to visit her because he feels guilty. We actually open up with like a therapy session about this with, what's his name? I always forget the actor.
Stephen
McKinley Henderson. Yeah. And, he's kind of like, oh, are you sure you want to go see your mom? You sure you want to go back to that well? And, sure enough, trying to get back home is an extremely dangerous. It's like the Odyssey, it's just like anything can happen. And the movie has a lot of different sequences and set pieces. I didn't watch the trailer for this, and I don't want to give a ton away or anything because I don't know what my reaction would have been. Like, I'm not sure what this trailer is even like. Maybe you can shed light on that. Wow.
The trailer, from what I can recall, primarily highlights the Nathan Lane segment of the film, and more often than not, the like play segment of the film. Those are like the two things that get showcased.
I did suspect that because there are a lot of like scenes and moments in this movie where I was like, oh wow, like this is one perfect shot. Like I could see the tweet that's like, oh, look at this shot of like, or look at this art style. And I was like, I could see them like playing that up of like in the trailer, like, oh wow, what is this movie?
Well, that's why I was saying that they're trying to kind of make this year's Everything Everywhere All at Once, because like they highlight the like, you will live 1,000 lives and like go through all this perilous journey, and they're trying to, and they show like like the multiple versions of him like writing the notes, and it's like they're trying to kind of play up like almost a sort of multiverse angle with this in a way that the movie is definitely not that. It's very, very, very singular in its perspective.
I think it was Alonso Duralde who said that he would rather read the coffee table book with like images from this movie than actually watch the movie. And when I heard that, I was like, absolutely 100% same here. But Will, I'm curious what you think, because I was thinking about you during this movie. I think about you all the time. But while I was watching this movie, I was like, man, where in the world is Will going to fall on this? Because there are so many things in this movie where I'm like, that's a Will thing. Like, this is something that I think Will's going to respond to. There were people in my theater responding to this movie in a way that I suspected you might. There was some laughter and stuff like that. But give it to us.
Yeah, I mean, on the air and off the air, we joke about there are John Negroni movies, and then there are Will Ashton movies. Not to say that everything falls into that binary kind of categories, but I think there are certain films.
Spectrum.
Yeah, there are films like Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves, that are John Negroni movies, and they're not my thing. And
why do you have to choose that one?
I have my qualms with them, but at the end of the day,
you make me sound like such a simp, being like, "Oh well, John likes movies like stupid Pikachu 4."
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that like that is a 4-quadrant fun fantasy movie with like a jokey, goofy sense of humor that I don't really respond to. It's not my thing per se. I don't like fantasy all that much. So that's your thing. And then there are movies like me, there are movies that I like, which are like Michel Gondry, Charlie Kaufman influence, surrealist, neurotic movies that I can see the appeal is limited, but I love when a movie like this can get made. And suffice to say, I love this movie. It was so much fun.
Of course. This reminds me of like our Anomalisa issue.
Oh, yeah. I thought about Anomalisa for sure. I mean, especially...
I'm thinking of ending things especially. Sure, and also, I think the movie that we agree on, though, that's like a Will Ashton movie is Mother. And that is a movie I do go to bat for. So I'm on your side sometimes.
I saw probably my favorite line about this movie on Letterboxd from someone I follow. I believe it was Mitch Anderson, who said, "This is Ari Aster's mother, mother, and mother." By that, referring to Bong Joon-ho's mother, Darren Aronofsky's mother, and Albert Brooks's mother.
That's a very, very good assessment.
Yeah, it's all those movies wrapped up in the one. And I have to say, the fact that A24 didn't release this movie on Mother's Day is a crime in some respects, but also maybe
of course they didn't, against Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, I mean,
too.
Yeah,
I actually don't even know if that's around when Mother's Day is, but it'll be out by then, I think.
I mean, this is not a summer movie, to be sure. I just think it would have been funny if they had the gumption to do that.
Sure.
Nevertheless, this movie is it's basically sort of like an after hours sort of heightened comedy where we have a very undersexed, very, very undersexed character who's just trying
in my Letterboxd drafts, I put the 48-year-old version.
Version or virgin?
Virgin.
Yeah, because those are two different movies.
Yeah, sorry. I said I meant to say virgin, and I went version because of that movie, yeah.
Yeah. But in any case, the movie I thought about the most was After Hours, Scorsese's After Hours, just because that's also a film where a guy is trying to get laid and then like the whole world turns against him. And to your credit too, Martin Scorsese interviewed Ari Aster after a screening of this movie, and I think they talked about that. Yeah, I mean, it's a very, I think, direct influence, as well as obviously we said the Charlie Kaufman surrealist kind of neurotic protagonist kind of coming to terms with his life in a very heightened, absurdly, darkly comedic way. But yeah, I mean, I think above all else, what I really respond to about this film is it just depicts anxiety in a way that I've seen other movies try to depict, but just hasn't really accomplished that much. That overwhelming sense of like living in this character's perspective. I think for me, like the stuff that you point out where it's like, oh, it's not really an accurate depiction of homelessness, it's not this and that. It's like, it doesn't matter because it's all Beau's perspective. It's everything is just what if the worst thing that could happen happened. And,
and I'm not criticizing any of that like framing. That was actually like the part of the movie I liked the most was that framing you're talking about and how it's like, right. Oh, that's actually kind of interesting. Like this world is interesting.
Right. I think that's the stuff that people are most likely to like about the film. The stuff that people are least likely to like is the third hour of the film. But I can say I was smiling from, I was grinning from ear to ear this whole movie just because I admire the swing of it, man. I mean, it's just like I can't believe a movie like this exists. I can't believe that it got made on a scale that it got made. I can't believe I saw it on IMAX screen. I can't believe that, I can believe that Joaquin Phoenix would do this, but I'm kind of surprised that he was allowed to do this as his follow-up to Joker. It's just, it's one of those films that, as you were alluding to, I can totally understand someone not liking it. It's not a film I'm going to be like, how could you not like Beau is Afraid? Like, it's a very reasonable response not to like it. And my audience, I think, was certainly torn, to say the least. But yeah, I mean, I can just say that for me and my own neuroses and my own neuroticism, I can gleefully accept a movie like this as being not only fun and sort of relatable, but also just a breath of fresh air. Yeah,
I will say, though, that Joaquin Phoenix did do Come On, Come On. Another A24 movie in between, so not quite his follow-up to Joker, but certainly a bigger film in terms of like how many people were expected to watch it, although I could see Come On, Come On having a bigger box office, and that was like only a few million. Come On, Come On is a great movie. I don't remember if we talked about it that much when it came out.
I don't think we did, but it's a good movie. I liked it.
Yeah. So the way I would describe this movie too, like the first hour, I'm kind of just like, I'm in because I have all this goodwill stored up for Ari Aster because I admire Hereditary. I'm glad I watched that movie, and I respect what that movie did for horror. And Midsommar, I thought was like, man, this guy is like steadily improving his craft. I think this is a terrific, like putting Florence Pugh ever more on the map, and it was a movie that was about like using horror in a different way. He wasn't just resting on the grief thing, which, we already kind of mentioned, but it was like, oh yeah, what if you did a horror movie about a breakup and you do it really well? And I remember being in the theater for Midsommar and, kind of similar responses to this movie, where it's like there was a bit of a silence after where people were like, what's going on? Like, I don't know about this. And I was just sort of like, I do. I'm like 100%, let's go. And then in this movie, all of that goodwill is stored up because I'm like, all right, I trust this director because I think that he does know what he's doing in terms of like, oh, I'm going to do something interesting with horror. I'm not just going to do everything that's come before. And it's funny because there was a screening for The Evil Dead Rise that same night as this IMAX event. And, fortunately, I was able to go to the IMAX event without paying. So, of course, I should disclose that because I said I made that joke earlier. But I was invited to go, and so I was like, oh, you know what, I'll see Evil Dead Rise at a public screening because I really want to see what Ari Aster's movie is, because as much as I love the Evil Dead movies, it's like I've seen Evil Dead movies, I know what's going on there, and I was like, this is something original, this is something that, even though I haven't seen the trailer, I get the sense that it's going to be a challenging film. And yeah, I got that. Because I think like the first hour, I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, where is he going with this? I didn't know this was 3 hours until right before the movie, because I was like, oh, when am I going to get out of here? Okay, this is 3 hours. Okay. Ooh, ooh. All right. Well, I guess that's something we're going to do here.
Yeah.
The second hour, we have the Nathan Lane stuff, and I was a little bit like, okay, like this is moving along, and I'm still kind of interested. I was getting annoyed because I think for me, this character is so passive. And I felt like I get that that's the point, and that he's not doing anything or barely talking, barely doing anything.
Barely can raise his voice above like a certain register most of the time.
Right. And so I'm like, well, okay.
Screaming.
I was like, well, look, Ari Aster, he knows how to write screenplays. He knows how to structure things. He knows how acts work in order to string us along. And then we start to get into a sequence involving a theater troupe and, a mass shooting, the whole sequence that seems basically pointless to the movie, like unless I have to read somebody's dissertation on it. But certainly in the moment, I felt like this is kind of an aimless exercise that I wish I was watching by itself without any other accompanying movie to distract me. And then, Will's already shaking his head because he can't believe it. And then that last hour, where I won't give it away, but there's a cameo of a character who comes in there at the very end. And, somebody who I deeply love and respect. And you have to try so hard to make me not enjoy this actor when they're speaking on screen in any movie whatsoever. Because when they showed up, I was just like, the Hollywood best friend. And I despised it. I was just like, this is such a weak, pointless, masturbatory exercise in a director who just, I just get the impression wanted to, air out a bunch of like therapy speak through surrealist, absurdist, dark comedy. And I don't think he executed it well. And so I want to say that I admire the swing, because I want more movies to have big swings, but I don't like the idea of a director just like making something and it not being. I just get the sense that like nobody said no to this guy, and nobody sort of like pushed back on it. And sure, I mean, that's his right. But I think it ends in a movie that I think is extremely unsuccessful by my metric. But I can't say anything about what other people say. I'll give the movie this. I mean, I've seen some people be like, this movie's gorgeous. And I'm like, it is sometimes. There are moments in this movie where I thought it was just like plain ugly and fastidious. But it's Pavel Porzelsky. And so a lot of this movie is just like incredibly staged, and the production design is flawless. There were just moments where I was like, I hate this. I don't know how else to describe it. And I have no issues with the performances. I loved seeing Amy Ryman in this. Her and Nathan Lane, like, there were times where I was like, why can't this be the movie? I was really kind of like sad about how some of that goes down. But I have no issues whatsoever with the performances, particularly Joaquin Phoenix, who I think just commits. And if there's anybody I respect in this movie, it's the actors, more so the writer-director in this, personally. Yeah,
I mean, I was with it throughout. I agree. I think the first half is probably what I responded to the most, just because it's the funniest stuff. And Nathan Lane is a hoot in this as well. Like his line delivery of everything is just so funny. And then there's without giving too much away, they have a additional guest that lives in their house, who I thought every time he was shown in the background, I was laughing so hard. He's just he's such a fun character. But
I found it too disturbing, that whole thing.
Disagree.
So I couldn't.
I thought it could have been, I think, certainly, but because he's so heightened and so absurd and bombastic, sometimes quite literally, it's just I don't know. I can't relate to like real life with that. I mean, to me, like I said, it's just so indicative of this character's worldview, where it's just like it isn't real life, and obviously, like there's keys throughout the film where it's like we don't even really know like what's driving this? Is it the lack of sleep? Is it the new medication that he's taking? Is it just generally his world anxiety that's plaguing him? Or is it just the world itself being so resistant to him in so many different ways that, like, I mean, yeah, I don't really take stock in this being true to life, but I also appreciate this movie isn't too far removed from the world we live in today in many respects. But yeah, I mean, it's a movie that certainly you can say it's self-indulgent. I'd be surprised if someone tried to argue that it wasn't self-indulgent. But to me, I mean, I think that's more appealing than not at this point. I want to see directors make movies like this. I want to see people really try to make something that is so deliberately uncommercial and just making something that comes from the heart and is filled with their own eccentricities. You can argue certainly that his influences may be similar to his previous films, or maybe a little too apparent. Like, obviously, we keep mentioning other directors that have influenced his film, and you could say the same about his previous two films. But yeah, I also just appreciate that we do have, at the same time, films that are unmistakably Ari Aster films, and I think he's certainly influencing the company as well. I mean, he's like one of their golden boys. And yeah, I mean, it's just fun to see. I think it's funny also that both Robert Eggers and Ari Aster and their like big swing blank check third movies basically made their own versions of Oedipus Rex. I think that's also really funny, just in their own weird sort of eccentric ways. And they're also kind of the Odyssey as well. So that's kind of a fun little, I guess, unintentional similarity.
I'd say the Oedipus stuff is way more pronounced in The Northman, and it's only sort of like softly implied in this movie, but that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is more the Odyssey. That's more Oedipus Rex, but they both have both in
shades of both. Yeah, I guess I could see that. The difference, of course, like I think Robert Eggers, to what you're saying, is the one who does those big swings, who does kind of like play with your expectations in a way that I do respond to that more. And I want to be clear too, because people might say it like, well, the commercial movies, it's not a bad thing. You know, accessibility, it's not a bad thing. Different people like different movies, and it sounds to me like what you're saying is like there should be room for both. It's like, yeah, you have your commercial movies, your John Negroni movies or whatever, your crowd pleasers, right? Crowd pleasers that don't suck, that aren't just like cash grabs, but actually like bring people together. Everybody likes them. Like a good one would be like The Fabelmans. Like I think that's like a nice crowd pleasing sort of movie that, you know, isn't just like, yeah.
This movie is not dissimilar from The Fabelmans, I think.
But certainly The Fabelmans is a more conventional, you know, and it's storytelling, right? But I think what you're saying is that like, well, there should be room for the flip side of that, where it's very unconventional, very sort of like avant-garde, like, you know, I don't want to invoke the French New Wave, but I might.
Sure. I mean, I'm not really thinking the French New Wave with this per se. I mean, there is a lot of...
thinking of Italian neorealism, or...
No, I mean, but I get what you're saying. Like, there is, like, Jacques Tati in this, for sure. Certainly in the beginning of this, like, some of the background humor, sight humor, physical humor is akin to that. But I don't know if it's, like, French New Wave, per se. But, I'm
not saying the film is, but I think it's of that category. You know, of, like, the time and place of which people are watching it. Like, I think this movie has to do a lot to kind of shock people, because we're in a totally different era where like what shocked people in the 50s and 60s is completely different from what shocks people today.
I don't really see the movie trying to like shock people, except for like,
do you not the attic scene, Will Ashton?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. The attic scene's like the one exception, but the thing I find amusing about the film is that you kind of see where it's going in each individual scene. It's just that like that's where the humor kind of builds, is that like they set up where it's gonna go, and just like he has to constantly try to negate what's going to happen, because he can kind of
I find it very alarming that you expected what was going to happen in that attic. That to me is what is more shocking than even the movie itself.
I mean, again, that's the one scene I think is the exception to the rule, what I'm trying to say. But I mean, also, I mean, like I've heard people say like this is like a 3-hour panic attack, and I don't think that's necessarily true. Like it's not
more
like,
meditative than that.
It's more
anxiety.
A
nightmare.
Yeah, it's anxiety. I mean, it's just like how it feels to constantly be fearing the worst, thinking like, oh God, if I do this is what's going to happen, and it does happen.
Well, then, and also on top of that, this idea that you're passive in a nightmare. That's why he's so passive, because you feel like you can't even move, and then when you try to take actions, like things get in your way, and like you have no real control. And he's trying to play with that as like you as the audience feel that way because you have no control over this movie. There are a lot of times in this movie where I think Ari Aster is like, oh, you want this to happen next, but it's not. Or you want this person to say this and it's not, which I get it. It's just that's just not a fun, entertaining theater experience.
I disagree, but I mean,
I hated it.
Again,
I don't want to be in a nightmare. I have my own nightmares.
Sure. Again, this is not a John Negroni movie. This is a Will Ashton movie, and I get that.
But I'll argue that I think Mother does it better. I think Mother finds a way to evoke that same feeling without, I think, frustrating the audience as much, or at least for me, because, I'm sure there are people who dislike both movies.
I mean, I think they're akin, but I also feel like they're sort of dissimilar. I get what the comparison's very easy to make. I even made it earlier, but
Mother is way more allegorical and metaphorical. That's the key difference.
Yeah, and biblical. This is a little bit more esoteric.
It's Jewish.
Yeah,
it's more Old Testament.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even I don't know. Yeah, it's just like it has more of a kind of goofy sensibility. Like, I mean, Mother is definitely not trying to play for laughs. This is absolutely a bombastic comedy. I don't even think Ari Aster wants you to take anything super seriously at any point in this movie, except maybe the beginning. But yeah, I mean, for as much you claim that's like overdoes it, does too much by the end, I don't think the movie works without the ending scene, because it complements the beginning. It is the thesis of the film. So, like, I don't know. I mean,
part of it is that I saw that, I mean, to what you're saying, like, I saw that coming of like what he was going to do in that last thing, but I saw that coming so early in the movie. And if anything, I felt a little bit of relief where I was like, oh, maybe we're not going to go there. We're not going to do that. Like, we're actually going to maybe be a little bit, in my view, more, a little bit smarter, a little bit more of like, let's find a creative way to wrap this up. And then they just do it. And then I'm like, okay, well, I know what 4 movies you're trying to like spin here. And I was just like, can we just end? I just wanted to leave. I did not want to be in the theater anymore. And for me, that's like, if I get to that state, and I suspect a lot of other people can feel this way, if I'm at that point where I cannot wait to leave, I'm just like, I'm done with this movie. It's way too long for what it's trying to do, at least for me. Then I'm going to walk out of the theater just with a very sour taste in my mouth. And I do think that this is one of those movies where I suspect that people who really despise it might not hate it as much the second or third or fourth time. The problem is, I'm not going to watch this movie again.
Sure.
Even though I do have I could see myself not hating it as much, but certainly like it. Yeah, it's a weird crisis for me there.
I mean, it is funny that you mentioned that, because like, obviously another point of comparison I think of is Punch Drunk Love, which is one of my favorite films from one of my favorite filmmakers. And that's another film where it's like so anxiety inducing. Another scenario where a very neurotic, undersexed, mild-mannered guy, finds himself getting in worse and worse situations. Like everything he feared would happen sort of thing. And that's a film I know the first time you watch, you're kind of wrapped up in guilt and like anxiety and trepidation, and then the more you watch it, the funnier and funnier it is. And I feel like I could see that being the case with this movie, even though I do think it's very funny on the onset. Because I feel like that tends to happen with Ari Aster's films. Like the more you watch them, the more you kind of catch on to how absurd they are, and the more kind of at ease you weirdly get. So I am curious to rewatch it.
What did you think of there were like moments where we have like the young Beau, and then we have like the young Parker Posey, and I think Michael Gandolfini is in this movie at one point as this kind of like, I don't know if he was supposed to be also sort of, I don't totally get what the movie was doing with the 3 sons or whatever, but
yeah, no, you mentioned it.
Yeah. Also, Zoe Lister-Jones, who I thought was very good in this. But what did you think of some of the? Oh, you disagree about Zoe Lister-Jones?
No. I said I said she is good.
I thought you'd be like
No, I said
what did you think of all those sequences? Like when we go back to the past, or when we have like the flashback scenes and all that? Because my take was those were scenes where I was like, I wanted a little bit more, because I was actually kind of liking how he was weaving those together to explain the present.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of need those as like little breathers. Like, I mean, you can't, I think even Ari Aster knows that you can't make an entire movie with like, this sort of passive character constantly kind of running against his wits. And, Corey Woodruff, friend of the show, kind of compared it to Courage the Cowardly Dog, and I think that's a funny little point of comparison, like a 3-hour Courage the Cowardly Dog episode.
That's actually pretty fair.
Yeah,
which I would hate. I would hate having to watch Courage the Cowardly Dog for 3 hours, as much as I loved that show as a kid.
But yeah, I mean, I think you kind of need those little like moments, and it fleshes out the characters, obviously, and then like, you know, it does give us like moments of reprieve where we see a little bit more of what the dynamic is with the Joaquin, or Beau, I should say, and his mom, and like just kind of like the establishing why Beau is the way he is, and then having like this one character, this one sole character who likes and respects Beau as a person without any qualms or you know, alternative motives or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I think it's it's nice. As far as the play stuff, I mean, I think it serves a purpose in the film. It forces that Beau is like going to kind of have to learn the same lesson over and over and over again. And that's why I kind of push back against, even though I understand that people are complaining about the very literal nature of the film. Like, it's not very like you said, it's not very allegorical in the sense of like, it's not being like what's the word, like vague about like what the intent of the film is. Like, it's very sort of analytical, but like also just like very blunt in its metaphorical nature. But yeah, I think it's Beau just kind of coming to terms with what he'll have to learn at the end of the film, but just, you know, realizing it very late on. But we need that kind of establishing to get that thought into his head.
I'll say something. I'll finish this out with something mean and something nice. I just get the sense that a lot of this movie was made up as it went along, because there are things that happen where this just feels like he was writing it and he was just like, I didn't really plan for this, but I'm just going to do this whole thing now. I'm going to add this in. And it just doesn't feel like it was self-edited whatsoever, because then there's like a plot twist of like, the only reason the plot twist happens is because he just inserts a character that we don't even know who they are, and it's supposed to be treated as this revelation. And I'm just like, to me, it was just really sloppy screenwriting, because I think he was just sort of like, oh, I can make things up as I go along because it fits the themes of the movie. But then when you execute that, I think, in my opinion, makes the movie worse. The nice thing I'll say is that this movie has some like really good transitions. I don't think the editing is good, but sometimes like the way the scenes are edited of like Beau like being asleep to awake to day to night, like a lot of that stuff was like, whoa, you know, like really cool. Just you know, on a totally visceral aesthetic level, I think this movie has like that kind of craft to it that sure kept me not totally miserable, but definitely a little miserable.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the editing was strong. I guess not every film can have the sharp editing of Renfield.
Renfield, better movie than this.
Disagree, but that's like also like sort of the anti Beau is Afraid sense of like, that's clearly a movie that was brought down. All of its ideas are sort of like truncated. All the weird stuff it was trying to do is like brought down. This movie is just indulging itself fully and completely. And I get, again, that's not going to be everybody's thing. I get that people don't put $14 on the table, get their popcorn and soda, and sit down to forget about the world by watching Beau is Afraid. That's
all I'm saying is, if I'm going to watch a movie that is like overindulging on weirdness and trying to be funny and using surrealist set pieces and art styles, I'm going to watch The 20th Century, because I think that movie does it much better. But,
sure.
You know.
Again, I also think that's going for a different thing, but I get the comparison.
All right. Well, I guess on that note, I feel like we're afraid to keep on debating this, because you know, I think it was Dan Murrell, because I watched his review, and he was kind of like, you know, film you know, or talking about movies, like film criticism should be analysis, not debate, which I thought was an interesting point he made in his video. Yeah. If folks want to check it out, I think he had a good review on this movie. Although Will sent me like a thumbnail kind of thing about it or whatever, that I was like, oh, it's just, I mean, the joke of that thumbnail, it wasn't against Dan. I think he's a lovely man. It was just more that people were like, this is a very not YouTube kind of movie. Like, this is not the film that like you get those like annoying kind of like screen grabs of people like reacting to the film. Like, this is a film you kind of have to sit down and think about and kind of talk about, not like have like an instant reaction sort of thing. Which makes it ironic that we're talking about this movie like only a day or so after the fact that we saw it. But nevertheless, like, you know, it's a film that I agree that like, I think you kind of, whether you like it or you don't, you kind of, you do need to sit with it a little bit more. You can't really like
well, that didn't work and that didn't work, or that worked and that worked, because it's, it's very sort of subjective. I mean, I get that this movie is very much, if you're with it, you're with it. If you're not, you're not.
I have the Rotten Tomatoes up here because we're about to play the game, and I just quickly glanced, and I mean, one of my favorite film critics working today gave it a fresh, and I'm like, oh, of course, I could see him responding quite well to this movie. That's Alex Dowd. But then also, Corey Woodruff is over here calling this, it might just be one of the best movies ever made. Corey Woodruff and I need to have some words. Friend of the show has already been mentioned. Yeah. And, Corey, I love Corey. I love... I love just like slapping high fives with Corey, going to the big game. But, this might be a point of contention. I wish, Will, that Corey and I had watched this movie together and gone to some like cheesy Tarantino diner right after and just had it out like Tim Roth style. It would have been great.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, not to subtract me from the equation, but I do kind of wonder what this episode would have been if I was replaced by Corey, who claims this is like maybe one of the best movies he's ever seen, and you're like, this is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. What an episode that would have been. Maybe we can do that as another bonus.
I don't know. Maybe we need to save that for, the world might not be ready. But okay, let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game. Only 97 reviews counted so far. I am planning to write a review for this movie, but I need time. I kind of agree with you. Like, it's not an instant reaction thing. And I've the person reviewing it for us at In Between Drafts, I'm just like, take the time you need. Like, this is not one of those where I think it just like slapping something out is always going to work for everybody. But yeah. We do have 97 reviews on here. A lot of people did see this April 1st. We didn't mention that the April Fool's joke screening, where we had one in San Francisco, which I'm glad I missed. But essentially, the Alamo Drafthouse was playing the movie, but they said they were going to be playing Midsommar, and that Ari Aster actually was going to be in San Francisco. And there were other ones, too, in other parts of the U.S. I think there was one in Kansas City, one New York. I forget exactly, but... Sure enough, I did go because it was hinted that there would be like a Beau is Afraid preview kind of thing. Clint actually mentioned this because they had one in Chicago too. So he mentioned that when we were talking about Renfield the other day. And I missed it because it was my wife's birthday. So I was just kind of like, I'll watch Beau is Afraid later. It's fine. And sure enough, I'm really glad that I did not see it because I would have... I don't know. It would probably would have been like when I watched Vox Lux, because I watched that at the Alamo Drafthouse with the director there.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember being a little bit like, because I did not like Vox Lux at all, as you recall.
I love it.
I feel like in both these situations, I feel bad that you're not the one who could have been there because you probably would have had a hoot and a half.
Yeah, I know. I'll case her off.
Yeah, sorry for rubbing that in. Anyway, 97 reviews. Will Ashton, what's the critic score? What do you think?
Oh boy. I mean, this could be, not that it could be anything, but like, I mean, fresh, positive, who knows? They
invented like a new thing for like the tomato that it's like cut in half.
Just a giant question mark in a tomato shape. I'm gonna say, at the moment, I mean, this could certainly go down, it could go up, who knows? But I think at the moment, it's probably fresh. I think people are probably going to admire the swing. Certainly, people are going to be outspoken and negative about it. That's going to be the case probably for time and a way. But for now, I'm going to say it's still in between, but probably more fresh than not. I'm going to say 65%.
It is not 65. It is higher.
Okay.
I'm going to give you one more shot. Higher than 65, but I'm not giving you like a ceiling on this.
Why don't we go 10 up and say 75?
Very close. I thought you might do that. And I was like, oh, maybe you'll split it. But no, it's 74. So close, so close. 74%. I find that alarming, disgusting, and certainly a sign of the times that many critics are liking it. And no, I don't have an issue at all with critics liking this. If anything, I'm just like, I'm thankful because I'm like, people didn't have because I don't want other people to have a bad time at the movies. I want people to have a good time.
Yeah.
I never understand when people get upset or like, oh, people like this, but it sucks. I think it sucks. I'm like, well, that's way better than the alternative, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think you think I'm being kind of flippant with the Dungeons and Dragons comparison, and I maybe am a little bit, but I do think it's one of those things where it's like, again, that's not my movie, but I can see why people are liking it. I'm glad they got it. Like, it's just not my thing. And
I think it's just like, it's like people want to be the contrarian. I think sometimes people want to just like be right about a movie before other people are. Be like, in 5 years, everyone's going to agree with me. And it's like, probably not. And why do you care? Like, this is how you feel in the moment. Sometimes movies are reassessed later. That does happen. But that doesn't mean you're smarter than anybody. It just means you responded differently. Get over yourself. I mean,
this is a type of film that I could very easily see forming a cult, status. I could certainly see it being not a cult hit for a lot of reasons. But yeah, I mean, I think people want to kind of be the first to be on that bandwagon the same way that like something like Under the Silver Lake, another A24 film, has now become sort of its own cult classic, and it was kind of rejected by the studio and didn't even get a theatrical release really, and now people are kind of claiming it and loving it and are like, I recognize the brilliance that A24 didn't see here. I could see people wanting to be on that bandwagon with Beau.
Or the opposite though, of like, oh, everybody's liking this, but I think it's bad, and then the other people don't realize it's bad, which I actually find that like worse. Because to me, it's just like, oh, when I really love a movie that people hate, usually people are like, oh, that's kind of nice. But when I don't know, there can be a little bit of an antagonism of like, more people should hate this movie like I do, that I don't get.
Yeah. I won't name names, but I have seen at least one or two people who like went out of their way to see this film knowing they were going to hate it, and just so they could be like, you fools, I saw it and I knew it was going to be bad. And it's like, well, then why'd you see it? Like,
I mean, and I know some people who are like, who very much dislike Ari Aster and think he's like a bad, problematic person or whatever because of his movies, that I'm just like, why are you in this like why do you have to? I don't know. And I did kind of make fun of Ari Aster fans because he does have a contingent of fans who are really annoying. It's a small, loud minority, to be totally clear. There are a lot of Ari Aster fans who are fantastic and like obviously they're named Will Ashton and Corey Woodard.
Yeah, I mean,
have you not experienced the Ari Aster stands? They're pretty obnoxious.
I have not.
They're the kind of film. They're like film bros. They're like people who are just like, oh, you just didn't get it. And like, you shouldn't be a film critic, to people who didn't like the movie. And I'm like, come on.
You simpleton, you charlatan, you have no idea. I can't. I think it's kind of funny that people are having that response to this movie, because it's just like, it is so neurotic, and it's such a film that I can totally understand why people don't like it. Again, like, it's like, I can't see someone being like, oh, like, how could you not like Beau is Afraid? It's like,
I think it's defensive-ness of just like, I don't want to be told the thing I like is bad, which, I don't know, shake it off.
Yeah,
be like Taylor Swift.
Sure. It's a type of film that like, I think the initial reactions are necessary, but it's also the type of film that I think you just kind of need to evaluate it later to get a full analysis. It's just, I don't think this is the type of film you just like can really have a full gauge with at this time.
We'll do the audience score next, and to be totally clear, I feel like these numbers are going to be different in like 10 minutes. But what do you think the audience score is? We have fewer than 50 verified ratings, so it's kind of hard to judge.
Well, I'm going to be surprised if this is positive, just based on my audience response to it. I don't know what your audience was like.
I mentioned.
Sure.
You weren't listening.
They were saluting the screen when Nicole Kidman was there.
No, I'll repeat, because apparently you were just not listening.
I was just thinking about the movie and smiling.
I said that the people were laughing a lot in the first part, and then the laughs kind of I didn't mention this, but the laughs started to get less frequent, and then at the end of the movie there was just kind of like a silence of like, what do we do with this?
I guess my audience was laughing more consistently than yours then, but I mean, certainly once we got to the Patti LuPone stuff, I feel like the laughs dwindled.
Yeah, people woke up during that stuff. Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm kind of chuckling throughout. Yeah, whatever. Audience score 45%.
Not 45%. It is much higher. 73.
Well, I'll be danged.
And I'll tell you what, I think it's because like this is the first wave. I think a lot of people who wanted to see this went and saw this and went to Rotten Tomatoes. And I do think this movie found its like ideal audience. So I think that's what's happening there. And that's why I'm kind of like, this could change very quickly. We don't have the score yet, by the way.
I mean, we should have mentioned it is in limited release in like New York and LA, I believe, at the time. And I think it's gotten like the second highest gross of like per theater average at this time for the year. So I don't think it's going to continue. but it is, I think, off to a pretty good start so far.
Yeah, it does face a challenging theatrical environment. Summer is on the horizon. The summer season is going to get started in like 2 weeks, and we really just don't have a sense yet of like how much Super Mario is going to make. It's looking like Super Mario could be like the biggest movie of the summer, even though it came out in April, like early April too. Not even like an Avengers movie that comes out like the last weekend of April. So that said, Beau's Afraid. I mean, it's counter programming. It suits a role, I guess.
Can you imagine like the family who try to go see Super Mario Brothers? It sells out, and they're like, "Well, what else is playing?" Oh, Beau's Afraid. Oh no, I mean, maybe
there's a
it could be
kid on the poster.
Yeah, there's a kid on the poster. It must be like a father-son thing. Maybe we can get some good family bonding time with this.
3 hours. We're getting real value for our money.
Oh wow, yeah. They don't make epics like this anymore.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like Lawrence's Arabia. This will be great. So we'll finish off with Letterboxd. 11,000 watches so far. Not too bad for this movie, not even beaten out yet, really. So, not besides the limited release, as you mentioned, in the IMAX event. But Will, we have 11,000 watches. What do you think the average rating for this one is? And I'll tell you this, it has more listed fans than a lot of movies we talk about that have like 100,000 ratings.
I'm going to assume there's no cinema score yet.
Oh, yeah, I said that before.
Okay. I was gonna say I was very curious about that one.
Yeah, that could be an F or in the D territory. Who knows? Could be an A.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, no, I don't think it's gonna be an A. It's either a D minus, or an F. We'll see. I mean,
a C minus for this movie would be like an A for any other movie.
I'm gonna say I'm gonna guess now for the cinema score just for kicks and giggles. I'm gonna say it's probably gonna be like a D. I think because it's goofy, because it's jokey, people are going to be like, well, like they had fun at the beginning, but then like they got restless and annoyed.
I think the issue though is going to be the length and the very end. And so I think that's going to push people down to like the minus F, but who knows? Maybe you'll be the correct one. But anyway, on Letterboxd, what do you got? Yeah,
but again, I could totally see this movie getting an F. I mean, obviously, but who knows? Any case, I'm gonna say the Letterboxd right now is 3.4,
3.7.
Oh, okay.
Which I genuinely like when I first went to the Letterboxd, and I was like, all right, what's the crew saying? What's the whole gang, the friends of the show, the folks that we follow? And I'm seeing so many 4 stars, 4.5, 5s, some 3.5s. People who just are sitting on the fence, I guess, and obviously lots of 1s, 1.5s, and 2s. But, friend of the show, Kimber Myers, 4 stars. 4. Then you have Matt Donato with 2.5. I mean, I almost respect the movie for that, for having such a varying effect on so many different people. Yeah. That to me is almost like a win for Ari Aster.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing on my Letterboxd like some 5s, a lot of 4s, some 3.5s. But then obviously
4 stars. I know you liked it that much.
But I also see like a 2, 2.5, and then like 1s, 1.5. I haven't seen anyone give it half a star yet, which is intriguing to be sure.
Yeah, I don't see that either. The lowest I see is 1.5.
Yeah, but there are a couple people.
Might be from the same person.
A couple people I follow have given it 1 star. That's the lowest so far.
Oh wow! All right, well that is Beau's Afraid. You will be able to check it out yourself when the movie comes out. Really, tonight, Thursday previews. We're recording this on a Thursday, so good chance it's playing in your area. And obviously, you know what we think in terms of whether or not you should watch it. And it's made $320,000 so far, which isn't, could be a lot worse than that considering the lack of wide theatrical. But I guess the IMAX event didn't make that much. I mean, my theater was very sparing in terms of how many people were there. There's maybe about 40, 50 people. That's a big theater.
I had higher attendance than that, to be sure.
And I tell you, like the Evil Dead Rise group, because that was a press screening that also had like public stuff, like people who like won tickets and stuff like that. So that was a big event. Like people were taking pictures, dressing up. And so the Beau's Afraid crowd kind of like, we like walked around the back. We were like ushered to the back of the theater by, like some staff member of like, you would, this is your theater. And then ended up being the big IMAX one.
All right, you sickos, you go in there.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like Beau's mom, just like throw you in the attic, and it's just like you go in there.
Yeah. Everything will be answered.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this bonus episode, and
sure,
we'll be back to talk about Evil Dead Rise, and who knows what else.
Yeah, I mean, when you guys see the film, if you haven't already, go on to Twitter, if it's still around, and say if you are hashtag Team Jon or hashtag Team Will, and we'll see what happens.
Better than Twitter is the Discord server for In Between Drafts, which has a Cinemaholics channel, and you could go there. If you're Team Jon or if you're Team Will, what happens if you win or I win? The next time we hang out in person, I'll wear my Beau's Afraid t-shirt that I got at the screening.
Okay, and I'll wear your Renfield t-shirt, I guess.
That's right, because I have the Renfield one, too. That's perfect. All right, well, we'll see you on the next one. From the Internet California, I'm John Negroni.
And for Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
See you next time.
Bye.